Bob pitched this to me. He said, why isn't there an app out there that lets people know on a set if their camera is rolling? And it's a messaging system, and there's a button. And I said, Bob, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard in my life. Can we please move on to talking about something else? And I felt bad about that interaction, and I thought about it some more. I knew all the steps to building a digital product. I looked at the kernel of what Bob's idea was, and it's status updates, right? It's a very basic premise of status updates. Oftentimes, the most simple solution is the best solution.
Welcome to SaaS That App, building B2B Web Applications, the podcast where we share real-world stories, practical advice, and tech insights for those building or thinking about starting a tech-enabled business. I'm your co-host, Aaron Marchbanks.
And I'm Justin Edwards. Each week we bring you the stories, strategies, and insights you need to build your SaaS or tech-enabled business smarter, not harder. Let's dive right in. Welcome to SaaS That App. We're back from the road and back in the office. I'm joined by my co-host, Aaron Marchbanks, who recently rebranded to that baby face, and as always, is much more likable than I am. My friend, is there any state in the Middle West that you haven't driven through in the last 30 days?
I don't believe that there is. Maybe Nebraska?
You've been putting down some mileage in your car there.
Big time.
Well, I'm super excited today because we've got two guests who I've had the pleasure of building, frankly, a really cool product with over the last year or so. We got Ryan Sands and Bob Shambo. Ryan brings a mix of marketing chops and a past life which touched the film industry. And Bob, on the other hand, is our resident expert on all things film and on-set life. Ryan, Bob, thanks for being here and welcome to the pod.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Super excited.
Yeah, thank you for having us, Justin. Excited to be here.
Cool. To start us off, could you give folks the quick pitch on what Rolling is and what problem it solves?
Certainly. Rolling is an all-in-one information sharing app for use in the film industry. Those kind of designed around the idea that two of the most common questions that can come up on set is, are we filming right now and what scene are we currently working on? Film sets are big, they're spread out, and communication is great. People have radios, people are very professional, but sometimes things slip through the cracks. Sometimes there's only X amount of radios to be handed around on set, and I kind of started putting Rolling together in my head as a way to resolve these issues, and then they surround. We kind of kept adding features and ideas, and then we found our third partner, Stu, who took all of our crazy ideas and actually made something very nice that actually looks good, and thanks to Justin and everyone at Elevado, we actually now have a real thing. And
So I'll jump in here just a little bit because I know that I was being egged on by Bob's eyes. He was going, get in here, you maniac. So to fill in a little bit more context, so my first career was in feature film production in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So that's where I grew up for a number of years. And I worked between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. I started out as an unpaid intern. I had answered a Craigslist ad. Craigslist back in its day. Oh, back in its heyday. And I'm talking about, this is like 2009, so Reddit was not super adopted at this point. Dig was still out there, and Craigslist was still a pretty strong social media app, for better or for worse. I mean, Casual Encounters was driving so much traffic to Craigslist. Anyway, so that's how I got into the film industry, was I came across...
Through Casual Encounters?
Through Casual Encounters, and it routed me all the way back to an apartment, and I rented that apartment for a number of years for $150 to live on a couch, but I digress. It truly was an actual Craigslist ad that I was able to weasel my way through the very nascent talent pool in Louisiana. So I was able to weasel my way up through production ranks to the point of being an assistant production coordinator. I learned very quickly that working below the line, I was not cut out for it. It is a tough life. It is a very tough, a lot of times working in the industry at large, there are a lot of analogies to the military, right, in terms of chain of command. And there's a very good reason for that, because you truly are in the trenches with people. It is a slog, day in and day out. Working on films is not glamorous. It is one of the toughest, most demanding, least rewarding industries that I've ever had the pleasure of working in. And so I decided after about 4 years or so that, you know what, this probably isn't the ideal situation for me. So I moved to Chicago, which is where I live currently. I, for a number of years, produced as a creative producer video content for the web back in the 20-teens. That didn't pay the bills. However, working in tech consulting did. And I found that there was a very logical transference of skills from working in the film industry to working in technology, especially from a full stack, blue sky view in terms of designing and developing technology. Obviously, Delta is very well versed in this. And we'll get to what turned us on about you guys a little bit here in just a minute. But I will put a T in that and circle back to Bob, because while this was happening, while I'm living in Chicago, possibly becoming disillusioned with shooting comedy sketches for Funny or Die as those waning years, Bob and I kept up every week playing video games together. I mean, right now, where are we playing the most right now? I mean, after this call, we're probably going to be playing Space Marine 2, but, Diablo 4 is a huge one. I've definitely pushed him into Warframe is a big one, but back in January of 2021, we were playing a lot of Warzone, if you're familiar with the Modern Warfare and Call of Duty sort of off-stripe. So I'll hand it back to Bob to catch us back up to this conversation.
I'd been kind of kicking around the app in my head for a little while. I had first thought of it while working on a set. It was one of those days where we were on location. We were very spread out. It was actually the show NCIS New Orleans is what I was working on at the time. I was just a day player. We had a very spread out day. There was kind of an unfortunate radio mishap. I didn't know if I missed the cue and we had moved on to the next scene or if it just hadn't happened yet. And I was like, there's got to be a better way. And I kind of started imagining this app, and originally it was nothing more than a little checklist with numbers, not even scene descriptions, just like scene 42, check, scene 43, X, and of course a little button that would call rolling. And as Ryan was saying, we were playing Warzone, and I kind of just pitched it like, hey, a little while ago I was thinking about this and been kicking around my head for a while. And Ryan, what did you first think when I pitched you the app?
I thought it was terrible. I thought it was a terrible idea.
I find it interesting that the conversation came up because you were playing Warzone.
Oh, absolutely.
What kind of trigger must that have been?
Oh, it's a lot of loading screens.
But you know what's wild is, Bob, I actually have burned into my brain exactly what was happening when you pitched this to me. We were dropping in over, and if anybody remembers, Verdansk, there was a prison sort of module area, a featured area. We were dropping into that area because I do flash back to this point in time all the time. I think it's one of those things, where were you when? Where were you when you knew that 9/11 was happening? I was a freshman in high school. Where were you when you found out that the 9/11 of your career was possibly happening? Well, it was when I was playing Warzone with my cousin, and he pitched me this idea. Now, to be fair, Bob pitched this to me. He said, why isn't there an app out there that lets people know on a set if their camera is rolling? And it's a messaging system, and there's a button. And I said, Bob, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard in my life. Can we please move on to talking about something else? And I felt bad about that interaction, and I thought about it some more because I had been working in tech consulting at this point in time for a number of years, full stack and full journey, right? From user experience, iteration and strategy, user testing. I knew all the steps, right? I knew all the steps to building a digital product. And again, going back to working in film, there is this huge analog over these two. And I've talked to Bob about it a good bit, and I'll say it here again. Bear with me because sometimes I'm a little bit rusty with this analogy. But in the world of creating a movie, we begin with the development stage. So the development stage is typically when a script is being created, when the spark is being sparked, when we are getting those initial bits of creativity sparked, put together. You create an entire package that is then sold to whether or not it's a studio or a production company that will be able to develop it out further and to be able to move into pre-production. So we have this development phase in film, where in the digital space, we call that discovery, right? In terms of figuring out what is it that we're actually creating here, right? Then, if we go back to the film sort of analogy, we move into pre-production. Pre-production is when we are doing the structuring, putting together of all of the nuts and bolts of the film. Back when I worked in the production office, I was an assistant production coordinator, and a lot of those nuts and bolts are communication, putting together all the different department heads, putting together all these different bits of logistics that are very endemic and very esoteric to this particular industry. it is one of those situations where there aren't a lot of tools out there that are really available off the shelf for the types of problems that these individuals and these teams tend to run into. In your product life cycle, like I said, you have your discovery, and then you move into what would be design. So again, going back to the film side of things, you have development moving into pre-production. On the digital side, you have discovery moving into design in terms of figuring out what that actual foundational structure is going to look like, all the way from your ethnographic studies and deep dives into what does that actually mean? What issues are we solving? Who are our users? What are those user stories? I'm sure that you guys talk about this all the time in terms of figuring out that product market fit and understanding who it is that you're solving an issue for. Are you even solving a problem in the first place? And I think that really comes down to the biggest core of something. Are you solving a problem that exists in real life, or are you sort of hallucinating what you would like to be an ideal problem for your manufactured solution, right? I think a lot of times, at least from working in tech consulting and seeing other projects come across my desk, I think a lot of startups look in that sort of direction. It is sort of this reverse engineering of what is this sort of fantasy issue that I'm trying to solve, and then how do I create the solution that is created on a false premise oftentimes.
People spend a long time at the blackboard or in their basements stewing on the perfect app, and they don't spend any time talking to the people who they're going to be their potential customers who might actually use the app. And very often I meet aspiring founders who can't answer the question, why would anyone care about this thing?
And I think that's the biggest thing. Why would anybody care about this? Nobody outside of any sort of user testing that Bob and I have been doing, just loosely connected to any individuals. Nobody knows us. They don't have a vested interest in terms of, does this work for my friends? And that's how we've been trying to create an unbiased sort of testing environment as well. But going back to, I won't beleaguer this too much, but in terms of rounding out that product cycle on the other end, so let's say on the film cycle, we move into actual production, which is where we're actually shooting the dang thing. We move into post-production, which is editing the dang thing. The counterparts in the reverse, the mirror on that, on the digital product side, would be moving from design, moving into development, which is often sometimes also called production. And then from there, moving into deployment and then DevOps, right? And then looking at iterating and reiterating. And then on the film side, that's sequels, baby. That's all that is. So there is, as you can see, a fairly, and again, some of this may be a sort of a loose mapping, but at the end of the day, we're creating products, right? We're creating products that we're sending out into the world. The interactions and the variety of interactions therein, fidelity of those interactions may be different, but at the end of the day, it's still something that you're sending out into the world. So when Bob came to me with this idea, again, I had that knee-jerk reaction, but then after really taking a review on looking at all the other, like I said, sort of false premises of a lot of startups, I looked at the kernel of what Bob's idea was, and it's status updates, right? It's a very basic premise of status updates. It's one of those weird things where we talk about $1 million idea, and we're not there yet, but I think we're getting there pretty close. When you talk about $1 million idea, I think the conceit that's buried there oftentimes is this is an idea that anybody could have had. Any real dummy could have had, but they didn't. And you didn't, because we're focused on so many other things that oftentimes the most simple solution is the best solution. So that truly has been the kernel, the sort of nucleus in terms of what the company that we've built out and continue to build out tries to imbue, if you will.
So if I'm working on a film set and that film set is using rolling, how do I interact with it? What does it do for me?
Bob, hit it, baby.
Well, you have your app, you open it up, you're immediately brought to a home page that has the show name, the day out of the day. So you'll see like, oh, today is May 28th. We're on shooting day 4 of 20. We're currently on scene 24. It's all right there. If you've seen the app itself, we have what is officially called the weapon wheel, kind of going back to Ryan and I being gamers. The weapon wheel itself, if it's black and the banner's not moving, we're not filming. So again, with the original kind of conceit of the app, with one glance, be able to answer what scene are we on and are we filming right now? Just a quick glance at the home screen can always answer that. Also providing some other important information. We have a little flip-up menu right on the homepage that shows the entire checklist for the whole day. Then you have all your other modules, dedicated button to the day's call sheet and sides, which for folks who aren't in the film industry, sides are this parts of the script that are being filmed that day. So if you're filming scene 42 and 43, they'll basically just be pages with those specific scenes, which consumes a lot of paper. And if they're ever misprinted, you now have to reprint them all. And people do use digital and people do get emailed them a lot. So, I mean, there are still digital solutions, but rolling makes it even easier because now everybody gets the sides. If sides or call sheets have to be updated, as soon as the updated things are uploaded, everybody has it. There's also a dedicated locations button, and it's one of those fun things where, looking back when it was nothing more than scenes and calling rolls and cuts, I can kind of see why Ryan dismissed the idea so quickly. But it's kind of one of those things, in my own head, I kind of went back and forth for quite a while if this app was worth pursuing. But I got some positive feedback. I had some early doodles and some wireframes, and my earliest testing was just going up to my coworkers on set and just being like, hey, I've got this thing in my head that I can't stop thinking about. Then I would explain the app to them and got a lot of positive feedback in the beginning.
I'll pick up there because I think that dovetails pretty nicely into the DIY approach that we had before we even came to interact with Justin or company and things. So Bob came fully loaded to me with this package of doodles and hand-drawn paper prototypes that he came to me with. And we spent, I'd say, probably full weekend auditing them. I was giving some input in terms of best practices that I'd seen, in terms of products that I'd helped to work on and launch. And we put together a second iteration of, I think if we go back to our actual wireframes, then they are actually included in our About Us section, or as we call it, our story, because this is our story. Our friend Stu is a world-class UI designer. He has worked on just nationwide campaigns for Marvel's tie-in with McDonald's campaigns, for launching T-Mobile products. I mean, you're talking T100 FANG sort of companies. I had no idea that a buddy of mine had this talent. We just never talked about it. We just were those kind of friends that I guess you just don't talk about work and you just enjoy each other's company, which is wild,
Yeah, what is this?
Who are
you?
Who are these people? And so the only reason that I knew that he was a designer was after a couple of brewskis, I had opened up about this project that I was working on with my cousin. And he said, well, here's my portfolio. Check it out if you're interested. And we were very interested. Absolutely.
Yeah, and you guys were strange for me too, because you were one of the few customers who's ever showed up with a fully designed, ready to go.
And that is due in large part to Stu Kiesau. Absolutely. He's top notch. I would absolutely be a reference for him to anyone, except that his work speaks far more volumes than whatever I could be able to produce for him. And we don't want to lose him. We don't want to lose the bandwidth, the resource. You know what I mean? So if you see Stu in public, back off, will you? Back off.
I'm sure because of your background in the industry and his experience as well, you had really considered flows that most people don't start thinking. Most people put up a kind of a happy path of designs. And you guys had really kind of dug into some of the edge cases and stuff, which is kind of cool and very different for us.
Appreciate that for sure. And again, that sort of circles back to Bob has been our in-house SME, right? Because Bob still works in the industry. Bob is constantly on set. So from those very low fidelity paper prototypes, he was, like you said, able to get user validation at a very low level, a very low fidelity buy-in, right? Before we were investing any time or any money, right? Bob knew and was able to communicate to us that there is something here. So once we were able to fold Stu into the crew, we were able to move pretty quickly from those wireframes into a much more polished UI mock-up state. So Stu created page states of every instance that we could dream of in terms of different user use cases and things like that. And then Bob continued, and this is over the course of about 3 years or so, to bring these ever-increasing levels of fidelity of prototype to actual sets, whether or not it was a commercial or a movie. And I'm just going to brag for Bob here. He was obnoxious. He bugged people and he did the actual work. He did the work that a lot of people just don't want to do. It's the work that scares a lot of people away. But if you know your stock and trade, like Bob does, and Bob is a person who's in and out, and the reason that he has remained in this industry for so long, where many other people will wash out, is because he is reliable and he knows what needs to be done. And to be able to take that consistency and to be able to apply it to a digital construct is huge. Whether or not he knew it from the beginning, it paid itself off in dividends absolutely down the line. So being able to take those low fidelity paper prototypes, being able to take the best user interactions and functions and features from that, and we moved into a Figma clickable prototype.
So just to make sure I understand, you guys spent years then with different levels of fidelity of prototypes, going to film sets and putting them in front of people and seeing what they thought and seeing what they said.
That is correct.
I'm glad you grabbed that, Justin, because that's a really, really important point for the listeners, because we don't often hear about all of the grunt work that goes into that first chunk. People are just like, oh, I had an idea, and so then I just built this thing.
People are terrified of first contact with their customer, and you guys did it the right way, which is get this thing in front of people immediately and see if anyone cares.
I credit Bob, absolutely.
I was very fortunate that I was in a good environment, and I got a couple of crew people who I've worked with for years who have seen rolling in pretty much all of its stages from the beginning, from literally me showing a wireframe I made on my laptop to seeing the Figma prototype to being actual testers as part of our first test group. And yeah, no, we got a few people who are very excited about it and big advocates for the app. So just unfortunate that they're not the people who make the money-making decisions.
Well, you guys should just stop making the mistake of not being friends with a bunch of studio execs.
Yeah, I know. And we've been working on that and figuring out a way to hone that. We've been doing exercises. We've been lifting weights. We've been doing wind sprints. I don't know if any of those is really getting us closer to the Hollywood elites, but it might be.
As long as you're going through pain, it's probably doing something for you.
So what's kind of the mission of getting this in hands? So you've gone through these iterations, you got it in front of people, you're working your way up through this, but I want to jump to the end for just a second. And Bob, this may be more for you, but you're talking about on set, everybody needs to kind of be in sync more or less, right? Or they need to be able to have access to the same information at the same time, when or as they need it. So I'm assuming that this means the ideal scenario is some person or some small group of people are in control of this, and everybody else that's on set, from executive producer all the way down to whomever else, grips or a makeup artist, everybody needs to have this on set for it to really play? Or is it just like some key people and then it just becomes, we pass this information along sort of a thing?
Well, the idea has always been everybody in the crew downloads the app and joins the project. It might be a little hard to get it adopted at the beginning. So we understand there might be a couple of people, but in order for the app to truly work, you would definitely need your department heads to all be on board, and most of your general crew. Probably in the early stages, there might be a thing where individual day players or some people might not be brought on for one reason or the other, but rolling was always kind of built with the idea that everybody gets on, so everybody can be on page. Get the caterers on there so they know if things get pushed, so they know if lunch is on time. Give it to the construction workers so they always know when rolls and cuts are called, so they know if they can safely work or not. Give it to transpo so they know if they can move their trucks. Again, from a personal experience on some sets, like I said earlier, there's only so many radios to hand out. Radios are expensive. Yeah, they rent these big packages and you give a lot, but you only have so many. So sometimes things slip through the cracks and some people just don't get radios. So we had a set where the wardrobe assistants did not have radios and they would always go to their truck. So they would be stuck at their truck literally half a mile away from everything. So anytime like a scene changed or things got cut, they would not be notified. And it was kind of an issue where they would sometimes just not be out of touch. And it was kind of one of the things where like, all right, well, if they have this app now, they could be like, oh, this scene has been cut. We now know we don't need to get stuff ready for that. We know when things are rolling on. If we genuinely need to reach out to somebody, we can look at our phones and be like, oh, we're rolling right now. Let's not make a bunch of noise and go out and try to contact people because we might actually ruin the shot.
Right. So in terms of like the decision-making part of the process, a production company, a film crew, whatever it is that's being shot, you all would have to be kind of part of this, at least pre-production decision of, we're going to use rolling for this production. So everybody's got to be on it. So
that's a great point, Aaron. And just to tag on real quick to what Bob was saying, one of the large ideas around the way that we design is that we design for a large window of people, right? We are designing for your below the line crew member, your everyman, your every person, right? And then we design out from there. And we have to also understand that there is a large range of tech competencies within that group as well. Because as you mentioned, we have tons of different, you mentioned costumes, all the way to drivers and teamsters, folks who might not necessarily interact with their phone and technology in the ways that others do, right? However, we are trying to design, and we have designed this in a way that we think, and we have seen so far, that it is socialized in such a way that even if you don't have your entire team currently on the app itself, it sells itself just via proximity. It's one of these products that has sold itself via osmosis in terms of, we've been talking about different sort of slogans and things. Check the gate is often a terminology that's used in film that means to make sure that the window gate is clear of debris and things that you can move on to the next scene. We've thought check rolling. Right. We want to be able to be that resource, that on-the-fly resource for your individual, so that the person on your team and your crew that is not using the app, well, they're just one step slower than everybody else, right? If young Ryan Sands on day one as a PA had this tool, he would not have been fired so many times as a PA.
The other thing that's really beautiful about it is like, okay, let's say that you have 80% of adoption. Information moves really quickly. And so if you have 80% of your agents out in the space who have the up-to-date information, know what's going on, they can fill in anyone who's not on the app. So you don't need 100% adoption to have 100% impact.
Absolutely. And we also know that, look, there is always going to be this old guard of folks that are about tradition, and that's how Hollywood is steeped deeply in tradition. We are never going to convert a lot of folks away from that pulpy stuff, baby. They like to have paper. They like to have this tactile experience. And we get that. We totally understand that. We're not trying to completely displace that experience, right? We are trying to augment this. And like Bob had mentioned in the first part of this, build a better mousetrap. There's got to be a better way, right? Because there are so many instances in just any sort of paper distribution for the injection of human error, right? Human error, and there's just waste, tons of waste. Also, the speed. When you talk about digital information, it's much quicker for a user on the production office end, a production secretary or whomever, to upload a brand new set of sides, whether that's the blue version or a pink version, rather than a PA having to print out multiple versions and iterations and color code them and collate them and make sure they didn't screw them up and resize them for the pocket-sized one. It's a whole mess. Make sure, hopefully, they don't get late on the way to set because every minute counts and you're losing sunlight, right? Versus, oh, hey, we just uploaded this new PDF to the app that most responsible crew members on the set are using. It's that easy. It's that simple of a conceit.
Yeah, the speed of light is pretty quick, and I think most people don't have any idea that these different colored sheets of paper is how things operate on set. It seems like silly to say out loud, but that is like the standard, right? Is this different colored pieces of paper that you pass around.
I remember as an assistant production coordinator, a large part of my job was keeping stock of making sure that our stock and supplies closet didn't ever run out of both legal and regular 8.5 by 11 inch of every single color of the film spectrum. It's a nightmare.
There's a lot of interesting things in the film industry that, if they haven't worked in it, seems very odd. But yeah, all the multicolored paper is very interesting. For those who don't know, it's just kind of like an order system. So the first attempt is white. If something's wrong with that call sheet, the next one's blue, and a whole funny order that they go through.
And then it doubles back on itself as well, which is, that's when you know you're in trouble. That's when you know.
You got all the way through the spectrum, and now we circled back around.
When you see double goldenrod coming through, you go, somebody fucked up. Somebody's getting fired. Somebody's getting replaced. You hope it's not you, but I have been that one. And again, if this app had been around, I really, truly think I would have had a longer stay in the industry. No, I kid. I left when I decided to leave.
You just happened to decide to leave right after you were fired.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly. You can't fire me, I quit. And that's been pretty much the story of my life, Justin. That's a different podcast, I'm sure, but we could talk about this some other time.
We'll have to have you back and we can exchange getting fired stories. So I got a couple of them myself.
Buddy, I love it. I love it.
When you're disagreeable and grumpy, it happens to us.
Oh, I'm the opposite of that. I'm a little bit too much of a fun boy, if you know what I mean.
We can exchange notes so that we can have better reasons for getting fired.
There's a balance, I'm sure, there. Yeah.
Well, you can get fired from your next gig for being grumpy, and I can get fired for having too much fun, so it'll be good.
I'll try. I'll do my best.
Can you speak to a little bit about how you ended up with Delta and the process from your perspective in terms of going from these really nice wireframes and prototype to the app that is in the store that you can use?
Yeah, Bob, you want to take that?
Certainly. O'Brien did a lot of the legwork on this. He found several companies and we studied them a little, had interviews with all of them. And that was kind of one of those things where we had a lot of good candidates, but you guys really were just kind of the clear winners. There was a couple other companies that also, they seemed very great and they seemed like they would do a perfectly good job, but they wanted pretty much twice of what our budget was. And it was kind of just immediately like, yeah, you guys really do seem nice, but these guys also seem nice and they can work with our budget better.
Well, but Bob, it wasn't just about money, though. I mean, look, money played a large part of it, and I will not even pretend that it didn't.
We're not on the budget end of the software development spectrum. So if someone came in at double our price, it's probably good that you opted to go with us instead.
W was probably just the next tier. I mean, we're talking, Bob, we had, I think at the top tier, something that was quadruple the rates that you charged us. It was ludicrous. And I'm not going to name any names, but I forwarded this voicemail to Bob. I received a drunk voicemail from, and they didn't say who they were, but I could tell the angle was, hey, we did so much for you putting together this presentation. Like, why do you call us back? Why do you call us back? We did a lot of work. And it was the saddest. It really bummed me out. I had to share it with Bob. I had to share how much it bummed me out with Bob. But I can definitely say to any business leader, thought leader, and all the way down to any sort of rung of the totem pole, that is not how you interact with any prospect or client in any way. It made my skin crawl. It was wild. But more so, I think that it really was, you have to understand that the partner that you are beginning an engagement with, you are going to be working with for years.
You hope.
You hope so, for sure, unless something happens. So you really need to be able to find those people that you can, one, obviously understands your mission and the product and what you're trying to create. And I know some of the time our particular industry, again, can be very esoteric, and there was sort of a learning curve in some things. But, Justin and Nolan absolutely rose to the occasion. And I can tell, did their own sort of film study in terms of what are the mechanics, this sort of thing. And it really did show. So you really have to really measure the content of the character of the individuals. Are these people that you can stand to see every single week for updates, right? And a lot of times you have to expect that a lot of times, not every single call is going to go great. Not every call is going to be an easy call, right? A lot of times this is solutioning calls, especially when you're working within fairly rigid, semi-rigid budget for us. I mean, I knew, again, coming from the industry, what I thought was a fair package out the door, right? And we worked on that and we came to an agreement and we kept to that.
Yeah, we came in really pretty much on the nose. It was pretty close. We did have some scope expansion, but it was stuff that we agreed to ahead of time and kind of included afterwards.
For sure. And I think, again, to the credit of your team, you guys went above and beyond. There was a lot of just thoughtfulness that was put into the directive for the implementation and the development, that a lot of gaps that we just didn't even think about. A lot of quality of life, some QOLs that really did just create just that extra touch, right? And it all goes back to solving real world problems, but just in a digital space, right? And one of the biggest, again, going back to this mission, this ethos of the application itself is, we wanted to make sure that we were not just one more thing that an already very busy crew member has to deal with.
That was going to be one of my questions is, at what point does it become just one more thing? Or does it replace a number of one more things, thus reducing the need?
So that's a question that we're still trying to hone the answer into. I think that is what's great about a SaaS product, right? Is that it is evolutionary, is that you are able to leverage that, or at least that is a function and a benefit of the system, is to be able to constantly roll out those updates based off of user feedback and all of that sort of stuff. So we're still finding out what that answer is.
Well, just to highlight a couple amazing things you guys did right. I think having that prototype that you went to actual users up front and kept working on, that's a very inexpensive way to get feedback and end up building something that people actually want. You talked to multiple dev groups and looked at a different variety of people at a different variety of price points. You made the clear, correct decision to work with us.
And we do not regret it. For anybody who is listening, we do not regret it at all.
There's so many customers who don't interview multiple dev shops or who view it as a price to the bottom. We're like, oh yeah, well, I've had this team that I can't really understand them when they talk, but we were able to get a software product done for $25. And I'm not saying that that's always wrong, but you got to figure out where you land with that.
That's a great point though, too, is that you definitely don't want to go with your bargain basement. You get what you pay for, right? You get out what you put in. And again, it comes back to, who do you want to deal with over the course of 18 months, 2 years, 10 years, right? Whose face, whose mug do you want to either see or just detest having to see. And it comes down to trust. A lot of this is trust. I've said this from my end of it being in Justin's shoes, is that this is a melding of minds, right? Just as much as we are an expert in our space, we expect and know that you are an expert in your space. And if we can come to a confluence of solutions and ideas, all the better for the user.
I think that's fantastic. And I hope a lot of people listen to this and especially if someone's trying to launch a project and take lessons from the things you guys did, right? Because showing up with designs, knowing what you wanted, having tested this with people, vetting multiple folks, it's also you get a better price because you told us we're talking to 3 or 4 different people. You got a better price than if I'm the only person someone's talking to, there's competition, right? So you guys did everything right in terms of engaging with us. So it's fantastic. And I love that.
Yeah. So Bob and Ryan, I guess, one of the questions that I was going to ask there as Bob was talking a little bit about it, because I actually honestly hadn't really given it that much thought, but having people that are a little restricted from technology, so can't have their phones out, obviously in this day and age, especially with blockbuster films and things like that, nobody wants to see a phone out because you may be videoing something or live streaming something. So I know I may be looking way into the future, but is there a permutation of this where rolling is not just an application, but also a hardware device with the application within it? I mean, thinking way back in the day, that's what Steve Jobs did. His whole idea with software was you also need to build the hardware because then you get to control it.
So that is very interesting because I'd say probably, 2 years ago, Bob, we were looking into the rugged hardware space as well. We eventually decided, again, based off of interactions that we had with individuals and folks that we worked with in the industry, that market has been so cornered in terms of rugged Wi-Fi, which would be the category that we would typically probably slide ourselves into, that it didn't make sense for us because then you really get into your pricing model completely changes based off of partnerships with data partners, right? And that just gets too complicated. And Bob and I are not super smart guys. All right, you got us up against the wall, okay? Is that what you want to know? We're frauds.
The initial problem you mentioned with not having enough radios to go around, that's the same problem you're going to encounter if you have your own hardware thing that people have to buy, whereas everybody's got a phone in their pocket this day and age.
And we also know, Aaron, going to your point, we're not a solution for everybody. And we have run into this several times.
I'm glad to hear you say that, actually. Not every solution to the problem is for everyone. And that's something that's important.
And you shouldn't try to make yourself that, right? There is that axiom, we hear it all the time, especially in video games, right? A video game for everyone is a video game for no one, right? And the exact same axiom applies here as well. And we know that. We take it on the chin, absolutely. But I will say, Bob and I just had a very recent conversation with a prospect who told us very quickly up front, he was a director around our age, who told us, look, guys, this is not a product for me. I don't allow phones on set, but I love the design. And I'm also working with this other company who I think you guys could have a great co-branding or a possible relationship. Who knows where it goes? He made the intro right there. We've begun having meetings with this other company. We won't talk about who they are, but they are absolutely up and coming and filling different gaps, right? So I think that it's a couple of different things, is not being afraid to get your hands dirty with those first customers or who your user base is going to be, and also not shrinking away from who your possible competition may be, because those may be your greatest collaborators too.
For sure. One more from me, then I'll kick it back over to Justin. But again, I love coming in alongside great ideas because it just starts the wheels spinning. But I have a very tiny film background as a performer, but I have a lot of history in theater. And I have been wondering this whole time, is there a space for an application like this, or perhaps this application, given a mutation or two, turning into something for the theater?
Man, that is so wild because I was a theater major. Big deal. Took me 7 years to graduate from a state school in the South, for sure. That's a great question. We've never thought about it, Bob, Bob, have you thought about more live performance sort of things?
I've thought about this and other things a little bit. This is something I've experimented with on some of the small commercials we've worked on. With some clever wording of the scene checklist page, it's actually pretty easy to turn it into a schedule. Instead of scene number, you just kind of use the scene number as checklist, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then in the description, write out 9 a.m. this, 10 a.m. this, 12 p.m. curtain call. And then, same thing. The admin can just check stuff throughout the day, and people can kind of look and be like, it's now 12:30 and we're still on the 11:30 item. Why have we not moved on? And so yes, actually with some clever wording, the checklist can easily be turned into a whole daily schedule and definitely used for theater, any live events. Actually was just speaking to a photographer I met who was very interested in using it for a photography shoot because he's jumping around to a bunch of different locations.
I was going to say the only thing that I would give pushback about is that if we were to move into the theater space, then we would have to work with stage managers. And those are some of the most insufferable individuals that I have ever met. I totally kid. Stage managers do not come for me. Those are probably some of the most hardest working people in the entire world.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. But no, I mean, you bring up a great question. Can a tool that is used for one industry that has a lot of similarities to the next, are they appropriate tools? Right now, no, I would say. Right now, no. Can that change in the future? Absolutely, for sure. I just don't know what value we could bring to the live stage just yet. But give us enough time and mushrooms, I'm sure that we could figure it out.
It'll be the question you answer after you tap out your first niche, right?
That's it.
All right, guys. Well, I think that brings us to a conclusion. It's a little bit late in the evening, and I'm getting tired, so show quality is about to start decreasing. So I think it's time to clip it here. Bob Shambo, Ryan Sands, thanks so much for coming on. Aaron, it's always a pleasure.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for having us, sir.
And thank you all for talking that SaaS with us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for cruising along with us on SaaS That App. We hope you grabbed some insights that were inspiring, actionable, or at least entertaining.
If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review.
Until next time, keep building, keep growing, and keep those apps sassy.